Hey friends, so if you don't know, my name is Hannah Echo, and I am the author of Honey is the Knife. I'm also a book doula, so I help people birth their books into the world. And I'm also the founder of the Lit Club, which is a cannabis inspired literary event series. We meet once a month, it's super cool. And we do a host of other things that kind of bring together cannabis, healing, pleasure, and words. So today I'm going to be talking about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's about why feeling good feels unsafe, unlearning self abandonment, and staying with your bliss. Now, I'm not talking as someone who has, coming down from the mountaintop and I don't have any issues with staying with my bliss. I mean, today was actually kind of a trial for that for me. So, absolutely not speaking from a space of being ignorant to the many challenges that we go through, whether it's like the challenges that we face with ourselves, the challenges that we face in the greater world. How do we move in this world? How do we move to feeling good? And why is feeling good the goal? For me, feeling good is the goal, right? I write about that a lot here, about basically almost every chapter comes back to how fearful I've been about feeling good, ways I've complicated feeling good, but also ways that the external world has complicated feeling good. So I'm going to start out by reading the intro, and then I'm going to go into the conversation. Feel free to again go do your thing, get some tea, get a joint, get some wine, do all three. Do what you got to do, right? So I'm gonna be talking about like maybe 30 odd or so minutes. So this is something to like really chill with. So let me read the intro to Honey is the Knife. You were made to follow your bliss, to melt into the sweet honey of your peace, power, and pleasure with zero apology. You were made to alchemize your shame, suffering, and struggle into bliss. Maybe something in you protests this notion, thinking I am being naive, a tad too new age guru. So let me say it again for your inner sad girl. You deserve to feel good, to heal deeply, to exist as exactly who you are. You do not have to do anything to earn bliss or wait until you or this world has reached peak perfection to feel it. And yes, I do know the world is currently embroiled in a poly crisis of epic proportions. I know how deeply racism, sexism, queerphobia, intergenerational trauma, hatreds, wars, and violences, spanning the petty and the brutal, endure. I know how much people like you and me are expected to give, and how little we are expected to receive in return. I know that your life has obligations and limitations and heavy histories. I know that it is not easy to change. Bliss is not indefinitely improve your productivity or become a respectable saint. Bliss isn't even about reading more feminist theory or marching down city avenues. Following your bliss is about gifting yourself the same sweetness that you so easily offer to everyone else. Being brave enough to go deep within, falling in love with the complexity of your humanity beyond the roles assigned to you. Following your bliss is never forgetting that your honey, your peace, power, and pleasure is your best defense in a world gone mad. So I mean that shit with my whole chest, right? Like, we all know that this world is crazy. Black women have been saying this for many, many years. We are, kind of like the first human being and everything. So, like, yeah, I think we've been kind of sounding the alarm, right? Especially recently. 90% of us didn't vote for the current clown in office. Um, yeah, like we know. There's this bookstore I love in LA called the Pop Pop, and it's like this cute little bookstore community space, and they have like really cool art, and they had this poster of Octavia Butler for a minute, and it said it just had her face, and then it just said I told y'all. That was all it said, and I felt that so deeply because I'm like, yeah, like black women we know, right? So this is not about me lecturing you or shaming you for not feeling good or having bad days because that is, I think, actually one of the detriments that gets in the way of us feeling good is this kind of like weird expectation that we're going to have this like linear progression of feeling good, and that just is like not how life works. But I still believe feeling good is the goal, because so much about systemic oppression and about the trauma that we feel on a more personal basis is basically about us feeling bad, right? It's about us feeling shame. It's about suffering. It's about struggle, right? And when those kind of things are fed to you all the time, it becomes very easy to think that, like, that's just like the way life has to be. That's the way life should be. So, in this conversation, in this like kind of lecture, in this sort of queen class, I'm going to talk about like why that is, why you're not crazy, or there's nothing wrong with you if you're struggling with it. And of course, I'm not just going to leave you out to dry. I'm also going to offer solutions about how to move into a space where you get to feel good more often than not, right? Even when you're going through shit, even when the world is like it is, you deserve to feel good. So first, we're going to talk about why struggle feels safer than ease. So this is coming from like a personal, cultural, inherited survival strategies which have conditioned us as Black women to associate softness and rest with risk rather than relief. So let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about that first point. So many of us, not all, we come from lineages that have literally been encoded with shame, suffering, and struggle. It doesn't mean that that's our entire story, right? Most of us know that, but that it's there, right? Whether it's colonization, whether it's Jim Crow, slavery, low wage jobs, horrible men, it's just like literally in our DNA in certain ways, right? There's like an imprint there. So what happens is um, it can feel really, really almost like safe to be in that space. And you don't realize it sometimes, like how you speak, what you seek out, but that there's a certain kind of comfort you have with that kind of like environment. So that when peace comes to you, when pleasure comes to you, when power comes to you, it feels strange, right? It feels risky. And how does it feel? It can feel like, this sort of like itchy, kind of like uncomfortable feeling. It's like when you get really good news and immediately you want to like go call your friend who is just gonna like talk shit about something, right? It's scrolling, it's the coping mechanisms that we engage in because softness and rest can feel so threatening. So when that is happening, and it happens a lot, it's our goal or our movement to like move out of this is to recognize it, is to be honest about who we are, what we've gone through, and what is going on around us. And so having compassion for ourselves is the key here. To understand that, yeah, when we start moving towards a more softer life, towards more rest, that's when all the judgment starts, right? That's when all of a sudden we have to like create more work to do because it literally feels weird. Like it feels strange, right? So the first thing is to understand that softness and rest will feel threatening to a system that is used to harshness and chaos, right? Like I used to have this, and I still actually work with this, is I would always like kind of pride myself like I'm a hustler, I'm resourceful, I can like get out there, right? And I would never really like take the time to look at like there are actually a lot of things that have come to my life with no effort, right? Some of the best things that have happened in my life, I got lucky. Whether it was like meeting really cool people, um, getting to be on like this like television show. It was luck, it was ease. It was my ancestors smiling. I like to call it like God winks, right? It's like the goddess is winking at you. Um, and yes, I've worked hard for a lot of things I've gotten, but I've also been very blessed in this life. And sometimes it's really difficult for me to hold that And that is something that I'm still moving through to recognize, like, not everything has to be hard. I don't have to fight all the time. That is not my inheritance, but it is kind of my inheritance because the women I come from, the lineage I come from as a Nigerian American, and as a first generation American, is about struggle, right? It's about proving, it's about working. And there's some truth to that, right? Like, we're literally dropped into this new nation with this whole long history of anti Blackness and sexism and queer phobia. And it's like, ready? So yeah, of course, there's going to be there's going to be a way that we feel kind of like, okay, we're like off to the races, right? But I started to realize, like, actually, not everybody lives that way, you know? Actually, like, life can be really sweet. And that when I sit there and I think about, like, this is something inherited, I can also realize that, like, and I can start a new cycle. So that's one thing to just like keep in mind, is to think about like you as your own ecosystem. Who are you hanging out with? Who do you come from? What have you moved through in life? Because if those spaces also have a hard time with rest, with softness, then it's absolutely probably going to feel pretty chaotic when rest and softness comes. Not to mention, like, those of us who, like, I hang out with a lot of artists, I hang out with a lot of academics, I hang out a lot with like activist minded people, not always people who are really good at rest and ease, right? Not always people who see the sunny side of life, right? And I'm there too. So I also know that it's not just like my ancestral inheritance, it's also like my ecosystem. And it's not necessarily like I have to kick those people to the curb or like do away with my values, but it is recognizing that, like, my ecosystem, because of survival, may have certain tendencies that associates softness and rest with risk rather than relief. So basically, expect it not to feel good in the beginning. So secondly, another way that feeling good, it can be really tough to feel good, is like, okay, so most of us, especially I'm a millennial, so it's been hammered in my head, right? Like, self-care, self-care, self-care. And there's a lot of messages like what self-care is. I've also had to learn what self-care is and what it isn't, right? Like, self-care is honestly like meeting my needs daily, right? Like, you don't just like feed your kid every other day, right? You feed them every day. And I have to do the same thing with myself, not just in a physical way, but also in how am I feeding myself emotionally, spiritually, my pleasure, my peace. Like, what am I doing consistently to build that life? But sometimes self care can become just another way to self abandon. So, this shows up when we get really perfectionistic about it, when we take on more responsibility than we can actually hold, when we worry about doing it right, right? So, this can turn into more control than actual support. So, we have to look at being like, one of the biggest things I keep coming back to is, how do I feel and what do I need, right? So if I'm moving through like any kind of like coping mechanisms, I know that that means that there's something in my life that's not being met. And that honestly is a big part. Like, so today, I was doing a lot more scrolling than I have been doing for some time, and I was going to get really down on myself. And I'm like, nope, I'm not going to judge this cope, because I know that this cope exists for a reason, right? And part of the care then is now to give myself what I need and not to be a perfectionist about it. I'm going to have more days when I scroll and I don't do much, right? I'm going to have days when I am pessimistic and not feeling great. I'm going to maybe have days I don't feel physically great, right? And if I have this perfectionistic mindset that, like, I have to feel good all the time, guess what's going to happen, right? Like, I'm not going to also take into account that, wow, look at the many beautiful things I have built in my life. So the same thing is true for you. It's watching how sometimes our self-care can become another way that we like hurt ourselves, right? Because we're trying to hold on. And we can understand that holding on is coming from a space of also love, but that for this to be sustainable, we're going to have to let go of, that perfectionism, and it takes time, right? So that's about like really praising ourselves for the things that we've done. Whether it's like, oh, I read this week. I went on a walk. I reached out to a friend. I'm helping my mom out, right? That is all self-care. That is also part of the self-care. And also a big one for many of us, especially like us, like only daughters, first daughters, is over responsibility, right? This is a big one for me. Like this is like I think like a generational thing. I'm like, there's something in my like ancestral like space of taking responsibility for shit that's not mine and having to learn like I only need to, like the locus of control for myself, I can shrink it quite a bit. And I bet you can too. So it's really looking at like, are there times you're taking responsibility for things that aren't yours? And sometimes we take responsibility for things that aren't ours so that we can push off and self abandon, and we don't take responsibility for things that are ours, right? Like I'm an adult, so I have to figure out how to make money. I have to figure out how to eat. I have to figure out how to like exercise my body, right? No one can do, I can get support to do those things, but I have to show up for that, right? No one is in my nervous system but me. So I will know when I'm self abandoning. So again, really watch out for when like your self care can turn into self abandonment, right? And sometimes it's very tricky. It can be very sneaky. And then you're like, oh, I'm doing it again. And again, we come back to self compassion, understanding that we're not alone in this, that like any new skill, it takes time. Third, the real barriers to choosing ourselves, right? So those are time, energy, systemic oppression. And yeah, right? That's just like in itself a word. Um, One thing that I've seen a lot is like you have these people like, gurus and Insta like influencers. They're talking about self care and I do this and I do that. And they're not telling you like, you know, that they have the support of like a seven figure job, right? They're not telling you that like that they are the beneficiary of like privilege, whether it's race, pretty privilege, money, right? They're not always speaking that. So there's a way that sometimes we can feel very ashamed, like, oh, how come I don't have it together? And it actually doesn't have anything to do with us. So it's also understanding like this is not always an easy world to feel good in, right? We're bombarded by horrible news. We have a narcissist who is office rocker who's in office. We have far right extremism. We have 10,000 years of patriarchy. We have environmental collapse. I mean, I want to keep going because I think you guys, you already know. But basically, all to say is like, there are some real things that make it really difficult to feel good. So that is an understanding that we all need to have is like, we're all part of this environment. Some of us also, we're just more sensitive than others. So sometimes, yeah, it is going to be very difficult to feel good all the time, if not like impossible. So that's something to really come back to is like really thinking about what are the barriers. Now, what I don't want people to go down, because I see this sometimes with a lot of activist minded folks and academics, smart people, sensitive people, is like, well, then we're all fucked, right? And we need to just like be talking about the problem. But it's like, well, then what is that going to do? Now you're going to have fascism and a bad back. Like, no, you also need to take care of yourself during this. Like, in fact, the worse it gets out there, the more you need to take care of what's in here, especially if you're a black woman, because as we can see, ain't nobody coming to save us but us for the most part, right? I don't mean to be negative, but I think we can clearly see that like a lot of the ways that we have moved is because we as a community and as individuals took the initiative to move. So if we're waiting for this like utopia of a world to appear before we take care of ourselves and feel good, you're about to be waiting forever, right? But it is also to understand, like, yeah, maybe if you read this horrible news story of something that happened in Palestine or Iran or Sudan, and yeah, maybe you don't feel happy go lucky for the rest of the day, right? But it's also being able to take care of yourself, like thinking about yourself, like that most vulnerable part of yourself, as something that now has a need because you took in this like bad news, right? And there is a lot of bad news. There really is. But there's also a lot of great news too. Like, did you know that pandas are no longer endangered? And also, California is now in not in a drought state. So those are beautiful things, right? We don't always talk about the good things because as human beings, we have a negativity bias because we are here to survive. And we're not actually made for happiness, which sucks. We have this whole apparatus that's like so about feeling good, and yet this and down here and other humans continually fuck it up. So yeah, when you don't feel good because of what's going around you, that makes perfect sense. And also time and energy, our self-care is going to look very different depending on what's going on in our lives, right? When I am on a deadline, like my self-care is going to look different than when I'm not. My self-care is going to look different. My self-care at the age of 39 looks different from when I was 29, looks different from 19, right? My energy levels, like what I'm able to even do, very, very different. So it's also understanding that we are constantly evolving. And so those are real barriers. And so we have to move with that and give ourselves so much grace. Like just like when you think like I'm giving myself too much grace, give yourself even more because you probably are not even giving yourself enough, right? So there are some real barriers that exist. It doesn't mean that you don't get to feel good or take care of yourself, but it is to acknowledge that we are all one, and therefore if something is fucked up happening with a family member or like in the greater world, yes, that might be a barrier to feeling good. And that is okay if sometimes you don't immediately feel good all the time. Fourth is the hidden cost of being the strong one. So this is a big, big one. So here I talk about like how chronic self-abandonment shows up in activist fatigue, spiritual bypassing, and overfunctioning, and then eventually long-term depletion. So some of you guys might know that my first master's degree was in community and economic development. And that's basically just like how to create communities that are thriving, that are developing. And one of the key like theories and frameworks that we constantly talked about was sustainability. Before it was cool, we were constantly talking about like, a lot of times people have these big ideas for what they want to do in communities, but the changes last as long as the person is at the nonprofit, or it's like the changes last for as long as the grant lasts, and there isn't always an understanding of like how does this change keep on growing, right? And so the issue with chronic self-abandonment is that maybe we don't feel it at first, right? You don't feel it when you're 19. You don't feel it when you're 25. But you about to feel that shit, when you're 39 or when you're 35 and you're like, what's going on? It's like now like you were constantly being depleted. You just weren't noticing it yet. So there is a cost to being the strong one, right? So many of us, we've shown up for everybody. We've like gone to the like demonstrations. We've put a lot of training into ourselves. We've signed up for the extracurriculars we're not getting paid for. We've helped people out. And that's very beautiful. That is a testament to our compassion, to our communal nature. But if we're not also giving to ourselves over time, that's where that fatigue comes in. That's where that depletion comes in. That's where sometimes the autoimmune stuff starts happening, right? Because we're constantly giving and we're not receiving. So there always is a cost to giving and not getting back, right? Like if I got my water and I was just constantly pouring out a little bit over time and nothing's coming in, it is going to be empty. So this shows up again in like the activist fatigue, right? Any of us who have been like, I don't give a fuck about what's going on in the world. Yeah, right. I've been there. Some of them still there because it's like I was so focused on everything that was going on outside of me that I wasn't paying attention or I wasn't paying enough attention to how much I was suffering in my day to day life, right? This also shows up in spiritual bypassing. So Many of us were kind of given this framework. Unfortunately, in a lot of Afro diasporic like communities, we have a lot of spiritual and I would say political bypassing where we're taught that the greater good is always for the group, the community, the family, the church, the school, but not about us as individuals, right? So we might like want to pray things away, right? You get your candles going, you are going to all these like, people are going to read your spirit, but you're actually like, that's well and good. But if you're not taking care of yourself on a day to day basis, it's kind of for naught, right? Like, this is our temple. This is our, like, this is what we want. We could have been, a galaxy or like a tree, but we came as human beings. We came, some of us as like women, as female people, right? We have specialized needs and ways that we move in the world that may be different and are also not always accounted for. So bypassing, whether it's spiritual bypassing or political bypassing, has a cost, has a deep, deep, deep cost. So if you're feeling that, if you're feeling kind of that activist fatigue, that compassion fatigue, if you know that that's one of your tendencies, more than likely you're also going to be dealing with depletion. And that is a cost, right? And it's chronic. Sometimes we don't realize we're doing it because it's so encoded in us. So this is just to say, I'm not gonna be like stop, right? Because it takes time. So another, some of you guys also might know, like I went to military school. I went to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy for 4 years of my life. I'll never get back. But one, but there's so many like beautiful metaphors about ships and about being on the ocean. And one thing that I constantly come back to is that when a ship turns, like a big ass ship, right? It doesn't just like turn. It's like a car, right? When you turn left and then you're boom, now you're facing left. When a ship turns, it's slow as fuck, right? It takes so much time because it's all those engines, all that water, all that weight. And so it takes a while. And I would say like, when we are going to change that like chronic depletion into chronic giving to ourselves, it can feel like really slow. And that's part of the reason why we chase instantaneous cures, right? We're going to all these workshops, we're signing up for these like masterminds, we're seeking this instant healing because we want to skip that part. We don't want to see all the shit that we did to get here, and we don't want to go through that discomfort. It's understandable, but at the end of the day, if we've been living a life of chronic abandonment, it is going to take some time to like change, right? It's not going to happen overnight, and expecting that is part of the ways that we like shoot ourselves in the foot. So this is that long-term depletion. So many of us go through it. Again, coming back to compassion, we don't have to judge ourselves for it, right? Sometimes this was modeled for us as a good way to be. It's still kind of modeled for us, but there's probably something in your this space, right, that knows that that's not the truth. That's not the entirety of how you want to live or how you deserve to live. And it's true. This is where your ancestors live, and they're telling you with the body aches, with the irritability, with the being crunched for time, that this is not sustainable. This is costing you, and you can absolutely turn it around. It may not happen overnight, but you can absolutely change. So now I'm going to talk. So we talked again about, let me go through it again. Why struggle feels safer than ease. So the reasons why, the inherited survival strategies that we have in our blood, we have in our ecosystem. I talked about how self-care can become yet another way to self-abandon because we sometimes approach self-care with a lot of perfectionism and over responsibility and an obsession about doing it right. I talked also about the real barriers to choosing yourself: time, energy, systemic oppression, and also why choosing softness can often bring conflict, internal and relational, before it brings peace, right? Because just like you're kind of used to overgiving, other people are used to you overgiving too. So once you stop, they also know how to be recalibrate, and that can be very hard. And finally, also talked about the hidden cost of always being the strong one, right? The activist fatigue, the spiritual bypassing, the over functioning, and how that can make itself known in long term depletion, right? So yeah, a lot. But all to say is like, yeah, feeling good, it's not simplistic. It is not superficial. It does take time. And it doesn't always feel immediately safe. So now to close this conversation, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to practice safety in feeling good. So these are small, tangible shifts to stay present with relief, care, and interrupt self abandonment in real time so that ease can become more familiar instead of alarming. So, any change we make in life, like whether it's positive change or negative change, our body is like, what the fuck is going on, right? Our body loves stasis. It loves like familiarity. It loves to be like, okay, this is what you do. This is who you are. This is how you act. So when you change that, especially when you're changing to feeling good, especially when you're changing to, really taking care of your peace, your power, and your pleasure, the body system, the mind system, the soul system, it might want it, but it's not comfortable with it, right? It feels very unsafe. And that's how we sometimes can spend a life like falling back from like treating ourselves like shit, treating ourselves really well, treating ourselves like shit, treating ourselves really well because we haven't given our body enough time to get used to feeling good. So this is a big one for me. I'm an Aries, so I like to just like go with things. But I've realized that the most sustainable practices for me have been really small things. Small, because over time they add up, right? So if you ever see like how water, when it hits a rock and it can make a groove, it doesn't create that groove one time, two times, 17 times, right? It's years, right? It's years, sometimes eons before you start to see that like impression that something has changed this very hard substance and made it a totally different shape. I would say that's a great analogy to really look at like how feeling good might feel to us. In the beginning, feeling good, having peace, being in your power, pursuing pleasure might feel really odd. It might feel weird. It might feel like something is off, right? Because it's encoded in our DNA because we're around people who also maybe are spitting out the same thing because we, have normalized feeling like shit. We've normalized being depleted. We've normalized being tired. We've normalized not feeling good about ourselves. We've normalized having doomsday thinking. So there's a certain kind of like unsafe aspect that we may have inside of ourselves. So just like when you're teaching, a child a new skill, and typically we don't just like push them into it, and that doesn't usually work. We also have to understand that we ourselves are babies when it's coming to feeling good. So it's not about the one-off girls trip. It's not about once a month you get a mimosa. It's about continual small tangible shifts and respecting that they may not always look the same. So a good one is our routine. I'm not the biggest fan of routine. I'm definitely neurodivergent. So sometimes when things are like, it's like too routine, it can drive me crazy, but also like being all over the place can drive me crazy another way. I need like kind of a both and. So my routine doesn't always look the same, but there are many little things that I do that have added over time. So one of those things that I do consistently is pausing. There's just something so sacred about like really getting out of our automatic space and being able to pause and be like, what am I actually doing? Right. So sometimes when I'm going out, and I'm about to get out of the car, I don't just like get out and go into the place. Like I pause for a second, right? And it may feel really small and insignificant, but it's often those unglamorous, tiny changes that actually add up to the most change over time. Another thing that I am practicing, and I've been practicing for some months now, is being very consistent about asking myself, how do I feel and what do I need? I got this from my coach. And it's like sometimes I'm like, I feel like shit. you know, I feel tired. I feel angry. And then be like, okay, what do I need now? And, as someone who is very cerebral, and lives in her, and is also a writer and lives in the world of imagination, sometimes coming back to my body is not always the easiest thing to really come back to, like, how do I actually feel? Because it was more like, oh, I just need to give myself this. I just need to have a better routine, or I just need this person to go away, or I need, but I wasn't actually doing the first part, which is asking myself, how do I feel? How do I feel? Right? So if I'm like, I feel tired, and then I'm like, okay, and I go about my day instead of being like, oh, tired, that's a signal that I need rest. Sometimes it might mean that I have to adjust my bedtime. Sometimes it means that I need a rest from my phone, which is why recently, and I haven't hooked it up yet, I got this beautiful brick, which is going to block me from some certain social media apps because I don't have the wherewithal always to do it myself, right? Sometimes it means I would reach, but it would be like too, messy right now. It's like I light incense. I'm like, oh, I need something sensory. Sometimes it's I need to stretch. I need to get up. I need to move. And those little things over time, those are the things that make the, like, lift us up out of that chronic self abandonment. Because basically, what happens is if I'm not listening to myself, right, and I'm, as a Black woman, clearly already abandoned by certain spaces in the world. So if I continue to do that to myself, I'm sending the message every single day that I am not worth checking in with, and I am not worth giving to. So it doesn't always look like very, again, big and glamorous, but just every day going like, how do I feel? What do I need? And practicing giving that to myself, you know, like wonders upon wonders, right? Because what happens is we want to make ease and acknowledgement and peace and power and pleasure something that's familiar to us, right? Because that's how it sticks and becomes our life. It's not just this one-off thing that we do. It's like who we are. But if it's the opposite, if like who I am is I chronically self-abandon, well, there we go, right? So sometimes, like for me right now, I'm on like a weed sabbatical. I won't be like, taking care of cannabis or being with cannabis until like my birthday, because I recognize that as someone who uses cannabis as medicine, that sometimes I need a break. I also can look at sometimes how I use cannabis. Like when my use goes up a lot, I'm like, oh, cannabis is carrying a lot more than it should be. And that means I need support in other places, right? And then I have to make the adjustment. So it's not enough to just have awareness, right? People always say like awareness is the biggest key, and like yes, but if I'm aware but I don't do shit, then like that can actually even be worse. So it's also recognizing like, okay, the reason why this is happening is because XYZ. So do I need to bring this up in therapy? Do I need to be more intentional about my coaching sessions? Do I need to just have time when I'm not doing anything? Right? What is that need speaking to? Right? And it's a feeling. There's typically many of us go here first to our thoughts, but even that thought is responding to a feeling, because this whole thing communicates more to this than this communicates to our bodies. So I have to constantly retrain myself, and again, it doesn't always come naturally, to really pay attention to how I feel and what I need, and that small things matter, right? Again, we have a lot of people who are very flashy, and it has to be big, and it has to be visible, and it has to be something you can show on Instagram. And I'll tell you that most of the most powerful things I do for self-care are not insta cute. It's making my bed, right? It's making a protein shake in the morning. It's like scheduling time to go to the grocery store. It's like being okay with sometimes doing takeout. It's laying down doing nothing. It's taking a nap. It's calling a friend up, right? These seemingly small things that communicate to my nervous system that I am important. I am not abandoning you. I am here, and I'm going to take care of yourself. And that's how we shift into being able to stay present with relief and care. And also understanding that it probably won't feel good at first, right? That was a big game changer for me. Is when I started to do these things, I was like, it's not going to feel good. And there's going to be a part of me at some point in the journey where I'm going to want to fuck it up. I'm going to want to stop going to the gym. And I probably will. But guess what? I'm going to come back. I'm going to recognize that that's normal. There might need to be some adjustments made. I'm going to come back. So that is how we practice, right? And I know we've heard it a lot of times, but if we're not actually doing it, then it means nothing, right? Awareness, you know, like you could read this book and be like, wow, but if you don't actually put into practice the things that you actually need for your life, it's just knowledge, it's not wisdom. So let's go back and, review what it really takes to feel good, to unlearn self abandonment and stay of your bliss. So it takes understanding why struggle feels safer than ease from a personal view, from a cultural view, from an inherited survival strategy view. It takes understanding how self care can become another way to self abandon. It takes understanding that there are real barriers to self love, to self care with our time, our energy, and systemic oppression that we literally cannot control. It takes understanding the hidden cost of always being the strong one, of what happens with as and how that can result in activist fatigue, how that can result in spiritual bypassing, overfunctioning, and long term depletion. And finally, it's about practicing, right? The solution is giving to ourselves. So if we learn to self abandon, we can also learn to be present, and that it takes time. It's going to look different at different parts of our life. It's going to be very fluid, and giving ourselves kudos, right? For the smallest shit that you do, because it's not so small over the course of your lifetime, right? If we can long term deplete, we can long term give to ourselves. And that's what makes staying in our bliss actually sustainable and possible. Because how I'm staying in my bliss, how I'm staying in my peace, my power, my pleasure may be very different from how it looks for you. More than likely, we're going to have some overlap because I think I attract very similar people, but like it can be very different, right? So I encourage you to do something for yourself, to maybe set, especially as we're moving into spring, this is like a perfect time to really create some new self care, self love rituals, and keeping them, like I like to say, take the edible approach, right? Start low, go slow, right? I'm not saying, I mean, if you want to do something like really with pizzazz and bigness, absolutely do those things. But also know that the biggest changes that you're probably going to see in like really unlearning self abandonment and learning to feel safe and feeling good are very small things. So find something that you can commit to for the spring. I think spring can be a really great time to start things. Speaking from as an Aries here also, and also because you can really like see it, like like all right, like let's start. Like, how did you move this springtime? I don't actually use the New Year. It's not really my New Year. It's kind of like, okay, this is a cute like cultural celebration. My New Year comes in spring. That's when I'm like, all right, what are the like little tiny things I'm going to be doing that are going to pay off? So for me, this spring, it's going to be going to the gym again, I took a bit of a break, for a while. I was still exercising, but it was very spotty. But I'm like, I want to make it a regular occurrence, and I've also adjusted. So as opposed to be like, I'm going to work out every day, it's like, maybe not in the way that I previously thought, but can I do 2 days a week consistently? Because 2 days a week consistently is better than looking back over the year and realizing that I went to the gym 10% of the time. So that's going to be one of mine, kind of, big and small at the same time. Another one is just like integrating like yoga and mobility into my daily like life. So that's going to be something I'm also practicing. And, really like experimenting with like food that I actually like that is high protein and nutrient dense. That's another thing I'm going to be doing this spring. So mine is like very basic self care because as a writer, as a survivor of like trauma, as a black woman, as someone who is neurodivergent, I sometimes move away from these things, but I always come back. So I also beseech you to understand that you are worth taking good care of. So when we talk about the divine feminine, that shit can be very like like Lottie, right? But it's like you are the embodiment of the divine feminine. This lifetime, it's you, right? Your ecosystem is the embodiment of the divine feminine. So if you're not caring for yourself, this is not an indictment against you personally. We've already talked about the things that get in the way. That is you communicating that the divine feminine means shit. So this is about you coming back to yourself. This is where it always starts. It always starts here with what we can control. So I wish you good things. I wish you feeling good. I know there might be some people who will like put down your desires or tell you that you're not doing enough or blah, 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 blah. If you'd like, you can tell us people to kick rocks, but also realize that you're probably triggering them and they're not your issue. This is about you. Feeling good is your birthright, right? That is how we're going to heal the world, is feeling good, and it starts with us. So I hope that this was helpful to you. I wish you so many good things, and yeah, expect me to be having more of conversations like this in the future. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you good things. Peace.